Ignition. We have liftoff.
Well, my friends, it has been a long wait, but no more. SpaceX has returned to flight just hours ago from Starbase Texas, but this time with the version 3 Starship blasting away in a staggering display. They verified a bunch of new hardware and completed a ton of new firsts here. Goodness, this was just so exciting, and it has undoubtedly set the stage for an exciting future to come. There is a lot to cover here, so let's jump right into it.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Hey, Marcus House with you here, and I've got to say I am still coming down from this ludicrous spectacle. After SpaceX's website information dump last week, the excitement had ramped up even further. So many changes have been made to the version 3 vehicles since the last version 2 Starship flew in mid-October last year. Can you believe it has been over 7 months? Wow, does time fly, but something tells me we are not going to be waiting around too long for the next one. This was not just another Starship test flight, this was the first of a completely redesigned version 3 system. New engines, new launch pad, integrated hot staging, a monstrous new flame trench, a heavily upgraded booster, and a much more refined ship. Pretty much everything that we were looking at here was new. Flight 11 may have felt like the end of one era of Starship, and here, Flight 12 absolutely felt like the beginning of another. After that SpaceX launch coverage had begun, it gave us a bunch of gorgeous new views from the brand new Pad 2 as the vehicles got frosty once again. Just look at this monster. Even after covering Starship development for years now, seeing the fresh full version 3 stack, the proportions looked a little different. The vehicle stands just slightly taller. The integrated hot staging components are a very clear difference to the old temporary hot stage ring, which was just jettisoned away before. The ship itself is clearly evolved in several areas, and of course, underneath it all was the first set of 33 Raptor 3 engines to actually fly. If you then add to this that it was also the very first launch from the brand new Pad 2, and we were just on the edge of our seats counting down here. We even had some sweet chatter live from the Indian Ocean out west of Australia, and there is going to be so much fun stuff to dive into here over the coming weeks. Loads and loads of great diagrams and animations at the start of the stream showing the hot stage system difference, the payload area and the capabilities there. We had the alterations with the grid fin systems, Starlink magic like this, and even a neat announcement by Chun Wang from the Fram 2 mission saying that he intends to fly the first human interplanetary flyby. That's a little far down the line, of course, but the excitement with the future was dialed right up. Yes, there was so much crammed in here, but today we are focused on the flight. We've spent months following all the construction and assembly work leading to this moment. The giant flame trench, the upgraded water deluge system, all of it had finally led to this first real test. I've got to say, to me, this felt a bit more like watching Flight 1 again, and with everything untested together for the first full flight, it felt like anything could happen. Here we were though approaching the expected T0, and there was nothing left to do but cross those fingers and nervously hold my breath to see if the detonation suppression system, deluge and ignition would fire up in sequence and lead to the most powerful rocket in history launching into the sky.
Ignition. We have liftoff.
Wow, was that incredible or what? This almost felt surreal, and immediately one thing became obvious. All those Raptor 3s are belting out an unbelievably violent wake behind. Let's just rewind and take a closer look at this in more detail. The detonation suppression system kicks in first, the flame buckets roar to life, and the top water deluge fires off as well. The violence of those 33 Raptors all ignite together at the exact same time instead of a slightly staggered ignition that SpaceX has used in the past. As the Starship lifts off, take a look at the exhaust and the deluge interaction. Gosh, I sure hope that we get to see some engineering cameras on some of this soon. Anyway, we were watching this beast roar into the sky once more, riding a pillar of fury. It's hard to believe this is even possible, really. The sheer amount of thrust produced by those 33 Raptor 3 engines is difficult to comprehend. Over 18 million pounds or 8,240 tons of thrust, pushing the largest rocket ever built at ever-increasing speed. Now, did you notice the acceleration? The thrust-to-weight ratio now with that power is much higher, and we can clearly tell. By the time Flight 12 hit maximum dynamic pressure, it was travelling nearly 200 kilometres per hour faster than Flight 11 was, thanks to all those mass savings and thrust upgrades. It handled that phase beautifully, and at this point the atmosphere rapidly thins out. Watch that velocity ticking up ever faster. You basically have this 124 metre tall, 9 metre wide skyscraper blasting out of the atmosphere. What still blows my mind is that SpaceX ultimately intends for this entire system to become rapidly reusable. Not partially reusable, not refurbished over months, rapidly reusable, and the idea is to just launch, catch, refill, and launch again. This has never been achieved before in any other rocket, let alone something of this almost impossible scale. You may have noticed that they did lose one of the outer 20 engines, which certainly wasn't a problem at this point. They can easily compensate for all that, but coming up here to MECO, or the most engines cutoff step, we had the first hot staging using this new integrated system. In version 3, the booster first shuts down all Raptor engines except for the Center 3, like we saw on previous missions, but now they keep 2 additional engines from the inner ring of 10 for a total of 5 engines, which keeps everything in the propellant tanks settled with less acceleration, while the Starship on top fires up and blasts away at the same time. Just check this sequence out. Yeah, the booster separation may have indeed been an absolutely amazing sequence, but also certainly not remotely to plan, as you can see here as it starts firing backwards for that boost back. That had soon failed almost entirely, leaving the booster to fall away without being anywhere near its intended return trajectory. If we just rewind and play this again in slow motion, you can see all but 5 engines being cut off. It seems that they are going to be using all 33 engines for the boost back in some sort of sequence, which was a surprise to us. The outer engines tried to fire up here with the others, but as you can see, it was a total chaotic mess watching that process. Ship 39 for that hot staging process though, fires up its 3 vacuum engines first, followed by the 3 center sea level engines immediately after. Hot staging looked less furious than the previous design, given that it has much bigger vents right around for the ship exhaust to escape from. It's certainly nice to see the end of that old hot stage ring that needed to be jettisoned away later. Now, we were still curious to see if the Super Heavy could remain in control enough to still achieve a lot of its controlled testing. It was, after all, still intact and facing the correct direction, so they still had some control. Regardless, it wasn't coming in anywhere near its intended splashdown target. The Super Heavy may look pretty similar, but there is so much underneath the skin that has changed. There's loads of alterations inside the propellant tanks, and it's now quite different how all the cryogenics run through into the Raptor 3 engines. Just think of the crazy differences in the engine plumbing alone. This also has 3 larger grid fins instead of the 4 now, so we wanted to see how well it can control the booster as soon as it hits that dense atmosphere. Sadly, of course, right after that, just a hint there of a landing burn attempt, but they didn't have enough Raptors firing up to really help as we lost the camera views right there. That was the end of the Super Heavy for this mission, so better luck on the next one there, SpaceX. It looks like there's a bit more work to do with the version 3 booster to hit that milestone so that we can see a tower catch again. Never fear though, there was a lot more excitement to come. The ascent phase of the upper stage started off beautifully, but they did lose this vacuum engine fairly early on in the ascent, just past the 3-minute mark into the flight. That left it with roughly 1/6 of its thrust missing, but the good news was that the other 5 looked incredibly clean right through the rest of the ascent. This version 3 ship has a lot of differences compared to the version 2, but unlike the Super Heavy, it's not quite so obvious. This new updated design includes major improvements aimed towards future orbital refilling missions, long-duration operations, thermal management, maneuvering capability, and even some preliminary docking architecture. Now, a lot of these upgrades don't necessarily give us any dramatic different visuals during a test flight like this, but they are absolutely critical given that SpaceX intends to make orbital propellant depots and kick off missions to the Moon and Mars and even beyond. What we were specifically looking for were any issues with the engine bay area. We've seen SpaceX constantly fighting issues popping up in this aft, especially with the version 2 ship issues that we had going on last year. Version 3 though is clearly cleaner and improved in this area. We have simpler looking version 3 Raptors that don't need anywhere near that same shielding. They just have significantly less exposed plumbing and hardware compared to the earlier generations. Given that, there is less opportunity for explosive gases to build up anywhere, and this results in an overall simpler and more refined thermal protection layout overall. Seeing that whole area looking much more mature and refined on Flight 12 was actually a pretty significant moment, even if they were an engine down. They needed that ascent phase to burn for a while longer to compensate, but there we go, second engine cutoff for the 2 remaining vacuum engines and also the sea levels right after. Now at this point, everything seemed to be nicely controlled with thrusters keeping everything in check just as we had hoped. Soon enough, it was time for that payload deployment demonstration. Now, this we were especially looking forward to because SpaceX was, for the first time, going to attempt the deployment of 20 Starlink mass simulators with an additional 2 active satellites. I'll come right back to that, but first, another big story has been making its way around social media. SpaceX could be accelerating plans for an initial public offering with a possible NASDAQ listing target already being debated. In many cases, when you're reading a story like this, it tends to get buried under layers of spin or bias, and that's why I've been using Ground News for years now. When this news broke, Ground News let me instantly see how many sources are covering it, who was covering it, and how differently it was being framed across the media landscape. Just at a glance, I can see the spread across left, centre, and right-leaning outlets, how factual each outlet is overall, and whether certain perspectives are being underreported entirely. That matters because stories like this sit right at the intersection of spaceflight, money, politics, and power. You can imagine how quickly this kind of story turns into speculation. Some outlets frame Elon Musk as an absolute ruler, others call this destructive for the rest of the market, while others focus on this being a potential $2 trillion IPO. Ground News pulls all that together in one place so you're not locked into just the one narrative, and that's what I love about them. I just think being able to step back, strip away the hype, and understand what's actually going on before forming an opinion is super useful. Ground News is independent and subscriber funded, so they are not influenced by the coverage. You can pick up the same plan that I have got for 40% off, so check it out. Visit ground.news/Marcus from the link in the description, or you can scan the QR code right there on screen to get started. Thank you, Ground News. Okay, so back to what was going to turn out to be an incredible deployment. With 22 units to eject in total, that was a monstrous increase from the 8 dummy satellites that we saw on flights 9, 10, and 11. In the past, of course, SpaceX has had a few issues getting the payload bay door open, but no problem there today. They kicked off that sequence and out they started to smoothly roll one by one. The deployment of those 20 dummy satellites looked really smooth. As stated, SpaceX has added new actuators on the dispenser system on the version 3 ship here, which looks to be working really well. You may have also noticed that these satellites were deployed a little faster than the version 2 ships, which is a nice improvement and expected based on what we had learned about this loader from SpaceX's recent website update. The part that I was really looking forward to was the deployment of these final 2 satellites though. These ones test out hardware for the version 3 Starlink units and also have imagery equipment to scan the ship's heat shield for any issues. I wasn't entirely sure if we would get to see live views, but wow, take a look at this. That was a real highlight for most of us, I think, because we've been wanting to see camera views from outside the ship since the dummy payload deployments started. The ship needs to rotate so that these satellites can look back and scan over the heat shield tiles. The idea is that SpaceX will in future do this and then know accurately beforehand if any of the heat tiles seem to have any damage. This process is kind of like the rendezvous pitch maneuver that the Space Shuttle performed. Hopefully, SpaceX were able to scan the tiles, although that was it for the views that we got to see. After payload deployment, SpaceX had decided to skip the next milestone, which was the in-space Raptor relight. Because the ascent needed to compensate for the missing engine, a relight at this point would have likely taken them further away from their target entry point. So yeah, that kind of makes sense. Anyway, then came the always nerve-wracking part, re-entry. With Starship's windward side covered with thousands of heat shield tiles, if there is one part of the Starship program that requires almost endless improvement, it is this area. Along with the standard set of tiles that SpaceX had settled on, they also included a bunch of heat shield experiments in order to see if improvements should be made to the adhesives or attachment methods used, or even, we assume, the recipe that makes up the tiles. As plasma began building up around the ship, one thing that immediately stood out was just how stable the vehicle appeared during entry. Because there was no Raptor relight, there was some extra propellant in the header tanks. This makes the nose heavier and means that the entry had some extra stresses that were not expected, so this was going to be exciting. Starship maintained excellent attitude control throughout the higher heating phases. Compared to some of the earlier flights where there was debris being ejected out from the plasma all over and flaps being burned through in places, this entry was remarkably refined. Keep in mind that until SpaceX can fully recover and inspect a Starship intact, it is very difficult to know for sure how reusable that heat shield may be after entry. It is probably the biggest challenge with a fully reusable vehicle. The only thing that really comes close to this in the past is the Space Shuttle, but after every mission, the entire thermal protection system had to be carefully inspected for cracks, missing material, impact damage, bond failures and gaps, you name it. In fact, the turnaround process for a shuttle typically averaged around 10 weeks from landing, and we know that SpaceX wants this to not just be reusable, but rapidly reusable. There have been some alterations in the flaps too, so I'm really thrilled to see that everything was so smooth in the control. The aft flaps used to have 2 actuators, but for version 3, they just have the one. Saying that, they've got 3 motors now for better redundancy should a motor fail. Visually, as always though, this entire re-entry sequence was absolutely gorgeous. Watching this gigantic steel vehicle wrapped in plasma while still streaming stable onboard video live never gets old. As Ship 39 dropped deeper into the atmosphere and slows past that 10,000 km/h mark, that crazy heat quickly disappeared and the nail-biting landing sequences approached. SpaceX had stated just prior to this mission that the ship will perform experimental actions tested on previous flight tests, including a maneuver to intentionally stress the structural limits of the vehicle's rear flaps. That was nail-biting on its own actually, and they really did stress test that control. Soon after, they also kicked off that dynamic banking maneuver to mimic the trajectory that future missions returning to Starbase for a tower catch will need to do. Well, as you can see, that banking maneuver was awesome, and it's worth doing a bit of a time-lapse on that here to really show how much this is affecting the vehicle's trajectory. It really was beautiful control here in this first version 3 attempt, and that should already be some pretty nice evidence that SpaceX will be able to essentially overshoot and circle back for a catch at the tower in future. The big question though, could they again nail the final milestone for version 3 in the first attempt? Yes, that flip and landing burn to touchdown on target in the Indian Ocean. This time they were going to try just with 2 engines instead of 3. Amazingly, they still looked to be on target.
Landing burn startup. 2 engine flip. Successful flip. Buoy cam
Starship is
testament.
landed. Good shutdown.
Oh wow, that top-down view of Starship just flopping down and exploding was a brand new angle. How amazing was that? As always, Starship is not designed to just flop over and stay intact, so this explosion is certainly expected in these soft splashdowns. That is a lot of icing on that cake for the upper stage, and as far as I can see, a largely successful mission with Flight 12. We've already been officially told that the shield held and that there were no burn-throughs, so this is a huge win. There is obviously some work to be done before Flight 13 on the next Super Heavy, so it's going to be interesting to hear more about what led to the issues at Boostback. But yeah, it has certainly felt like a long time coming to see this mission. As far as we can see, the launch site is looking good. They may need to improve that signage a little though. It may take a little time to determine if there are any upgrades or repairs needed around the launch site before the next flight, but to me, this feels like we've just hit the point where we are going to see the launch frequency ramp right up and start progressing fast with all those milestones needed for prime time, rapid reuse, orbital refilling, and loads for the human landing system architecture. It feels like it all starts right here with the successes from Flight 12. I think Flight 13 may be coming a lot sooner than you may think. We also had more Starlinks for the week after a little downtime, which feels a tad unusual these days. In fact, this was SpaceX's first Starlink mission in 2 weeks. On Tuesday evening, Group 1742 was off from Vandenberg. This was an almost brand new booster number 1103, touching down for only its second time on Of Course I Still Love You. Picking that pace right back up again, Group 1031 was off 2 days later on Thursday from Space Launch Complex 40 across the country. This booster 1077 though was anything but new. It was landing on a shortfall of gravitas for its 28th touchdown. Now, what I thought was interesting was this post by Christian here almost 2 weeks ago, who pointed out that SpaceX only had about 200 more satellites to put into orbit before they pass a pretty bonkers sort of milestone. At that point, they'll have launched more satellites than the rest of the world ever combined. As he said here, despite giving the rest of the world a 61-year head start, that's pretty darn crazy. Anyway, given that SpaceX has just put up batches of 24 and 29 Starlinks this week, that figure is now around 150 satellites to go. So yeah, in a few weeks, they will have passed that bizarre milestone. It is also worth a quick mention of the CRS-34 Dragon docking to the International Space Station. I only had the chance to cover the initial launch with that pushed right through to the end of last week. Check this out though, Sen streamed a breathtaking view of the docking on Sunday, and I just had to share this with you. There are some neat experiments on board here, and I've got a link to those in the description for you so that you can browse all the stuff that they are going to be researching. I'm quite interested to see the results of the green bone experiments on board that will observe how bone cells grow to this wood scaffolding. The hope is that this will end up helping those with osteoporosis with some future breakthroughs. Stoke Space has been busy too. These views are from their test facility at Moses Lake, Washington, and they've been testing their Zenith engine to its limits here. Along with that, you will notice the Nova's first stage structure going through structural testing. Although this looks a little like SpaceX's Super Heavy, it is much smaller. It is around 27 meters or just under 90 feet tall and 3.8 meters in diameter or 12.5 feet. This is a neat peek inside that stage 1 tank actually, so it's nice to see all this coming together. If you add this to the view of their Andromeda flight engine in March, it's feeling quite exciting to see all those components passing a bunch of milestones. Now check this out, NASA has just posted these images from the Psyche spacecraft as it was swinging by Mars on its way to its next destination, which is of course the metal-rich asteroid also named Psyche. This gravity assist has helped it on its way, with the red planet providing a nice 1,000 mile/hour speed boost. Also, it was a perfect time to pick up some stunning photos as well, and the spacecraft is now headed directly to that asteroid located in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. I really love this image in particular. It was captured by the multispectral imager instrument and is an enhanced colour view of the large double ring crater Huygens shortly after its closest approach. The various colours are, we believe, highlighting composition differences in the dust, sand and bedrock in the terrain. Very cool. We have an interesting update from VAST this week. They've announced that they are officially expanding into high-power satellites, which is probably not overly surprising. Their new platform, imaginatively called VAST Satellite, is designed as a high-power satellite bus aimed at operators who need equipment in space such as communications, Earth observation gear, payloads for national security, and, as seems to be an almost standard talking point these days, even orbital data center constellations can hitch a ride. They are not starting small either. Their first offering will be a 15 kilowatt class satellite bus, with the company aiming to deploy 10 of these by 2027. The platform itself is around 3 by 4 meters. It has a mass of roughly 700 kilograms and a payload capacity of at least 350. Vast says that the satellites are designed for a 5-year operational lifetime and will be able to operate everywhere from low Earth orbit all the way out to a lunar orbit. Now, this move doesn't exactly come out of nowhere. We already saw them launch and test their vast Haven demo mission last year, which successfully executed a controlled deorbit back in February. That mission tested out a number of Vast's in-house developed systems, a fairly typical sort of list that you would expect: avionics, power, communications, propulsion, and software, and this success has obviously all made it possible for them to push forward with their satellite bus. Now, for their orbital data center support, Vast plans to offer an NVIDIA Space One Vera Rubin module. In fact, they've already signed a confidential customer up with 4 satellites, with options that could scale all the way up to 200 additional spacecraft, so they are already on a roll here. So with all of that, we have another successful Vega-C launch on Tuesday this week for the European Space Agency with SMILE, or the Solar Wind Magnetosphere Ionosphere Link Explorer. Vega-C isn't that big of a rocket when you compare it to, say, a Falcon 9. It is in fact well under half the weight launching off the pad, but nice for these smaller payloads. Vega-C has 3 solid propellant-powered stages, which takes it all the way to the initial orbit. The 4th liquid propellant stage finalises that orbit, and after a successful mission, this deorbits itself as well. Now, this is actually a joint mission between ESA and the Chinese Academy of Sciences. SMILE is all about space weather and understanding how Earth reacts to the constant stream of charged particles flowing from the solar wind. SMILE actually carries 4 scientific instruments that will study the interaction between those particles coming from the Sun and Earth's magnetic field. It will help us better understand solar storms, geomagnetic activity, and the kinds of events that can impact all those satellites and communication systems that we are very much relying on these days. With that, it'll also help us understand the impact of power grids here on Earth. It may not be one of those science missions that grabs huge headlines, but even still, the data could end up being incredibly valuable as we become more and more dependent on space-based infrastructure in the future. So there we go, my friends, an absolutely incredible day. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe so we get to keep making them. If you want to continue with more space goodness, check out this video here next. Thanks for watching all this way through. As always, I will see you all in the next video.